Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the swirling hyperspace tunnel collapse behind her fleet. 250 human warships materialized in the Proxima Centauri system, their hulls scarred from the brutal fighting at Earth. The blue-white star cast harsh shadows across her weathered face as she stared at the emergency beacon still broadcasting from the ruins of humanity's first colony. "Ma'am, we're picking up multiple Galactic Council signatures," Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez reported from the sensor station. His voice carried the same cold fury that had driven them across 12 light-years in just 3 days. "Looks like a full occupation fleet. 78 vessels, mostly Zephyrian dreadnoughts and Kethter cruisers." Sarah's jaw tightened. The Council had made their message clear when they glassed the outer colonies and blockaded Earth. Humanity was to be contained, neutered, and eventually absorbed into their vast empire as a client species. The Alien Alliance had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, crushing any race that showed independence or technological promise. They had made one critical error. They assumed humans would surrender. "Signal the fleet," Sarah commanded. "Battle formation Delta 7, all ships prepare for immediate engagement." The communications officer, a young ensign named Park, hesitated. "Admiral, we're outnumbered more than 3-1. Shouldn't we wait for reinforcements?" Sarah turned to face her bridge crew. These men and women had watched their homeworld burn. They had seen the Council's mercy firsthand when the aliens turned Neptune's orbital shipyards into radioactive debris. Every person on every ship carried the same burning need for justice. "The Council thinks we're beaten," she said, her voice cutting through the bridge's tension. "They think humans are just another primitive species to be crushed under their boot. Today, we show them what happens when you corner a pack of wolves." The tactical display lit up as her fleet spread into attack formation. Human ship design had always confused the Council races. Where alien vessels were elegant, flowing constructions built for efficiency and beauty, human warships looked like flying fortresses. They were ugly, angular, and absolutely bristling with weapons. The UES Retribution led the charge, her massive frame cutting through space like a knife. Behind her, battle cruisers, destroyers, and frigates formed a wall of steel and fury. Each ship carried crews who had lost family, friends, and homes to the Council's peacekeeping operation. "Incoming transmission from the Council fleet," Park announced. "It's Admiral Zethkala of the Zephyrian Third Fleet." "Put him through," Sarah ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the insectoid features of a Zephyrian commander. His compound eyes reflected the bridge lighting as his mandibles clicked in what Sarah recognized as amusement. "Human fleet, you will power down your weapons and surrender immediately." Zethkala's translator rendered his chittering speech into cold, mechanical words. "Your resistance at Earth was impressive but futile. The Galactic Council offers one final chance for your species to accept integration under our guidance." Sarah stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. "Admiral Zethkala, I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Navy. I have a counteroffer for you." The alien's mandibles stopped clicking. "You are in no position to make demands human." "Get out of our system," Sarah said simply. "Leave now, and we might let you live long enough to report back to your masters." Zethkala's translator actually paused for a moment, as if struggling to process the sheer audacity of the statement. When it resumed, the Zephyrian's voice carried notes of genuine disbelief. "You cannot be serious. My fleet alone outmasses your entire force by a factor of 3. The combined might of the Council has never been successfully challenged by any species." Sarah smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "That's because you've never fought humans before." The transmission cut off. Across the tactical display, the Council fleet began moving into their standard engagement pattern. Sarah had studied their tactics extensively during the journey from Earth. The aliens were methodical, predictable, and completely unprepared for human ingenuity. "All ships execute Plan Wolverine," Sarah ordered. "Remember, we're not here to win a battle, we're here to send a message." The human fleet suddenly scattered like a school of fish, breaking their formation into dozens of smaller attack groups. This wasn't standard fleet doctrine for any known species. Most civilized races fought in orderly formations, with carefully coordinated movements and gentlemanly exchanges of fire. Humans had never been accused of being civilized. The UES Retribution dove straight toward the center of the Council formation. her forward batteries already charging. Behind her, the battlecruiser Stalingrad peeled off to engage the left flank, while the carrier groups launched wave after wave of fighter craft. "Contact in 30 seconds, Rodriguez called out. "Council ships are trying to maintain formation." Sarah watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The aliens were reacting exactly as she had predicted. They were attempting to fight a traditional engagement, assuming the humans would eventually fall back into proper battle lines. "Fire," she commanded. The Retribution's main guns opened up with a sound like thunder. 36-inch plasma cannons sent bolts of superheated energy across the void, while missile batteries filled space with intelligent projectiles. The lead Zephyrian dreadnought's shields flared and held, but the sheer volume of fire was staggering. This was the first lesson the Council was about to learn. Human weapons weren't elegant or efficient. They were brutal, overwhelming, and designed to punch through anything in their path. The battle exploded across the Proxima Centauri system as 250 human warships engaged the Council occupation fleet. What followed wasn't a traditional space battle. It was a demonstration of human warfare at its most primal level. Human ships didn't maintain safe distances or fight with honor. They closed to knife-fighting range and unleashed everything they had. When the destroyer Patton's main guns were knocked out, her captain rammed his ship into the side of a Kethter cruiser and detonated his reactor. The explosion took out 3 more enemy vessels. "Admiral, the Zephyrians are requesting immediate assistance," Park reported, his voice tight with excitement. "They're calling for reinforcements from the Andra system." Sarah nodded grimly. "Let them call. By the time help arrives, there won't be anyone left to save." The UES Retribution shuddered under enemy fire as she closed with Admiral Zethkala's flagship. The Zephyrian ship was a work of art, all flowing curves and organic designs that spoke of thousands of years of refined engineering. It should have been able to destroy the human battleship with ease. Instead, the Retribution's crude, angular hull absorbed hit after hit while returning fire with interest. Human armor was primitive compared to Council technology, but it was thick, redundant, and designed to keep fighting even when half the ship was gone. "Direct hit on their port weapon array," Rodriguez called out. "Their shields are down to 40%. "Target their bridge," Sarah ordered. "Let's end this." The Retribution's forward guns spoke again, and this time the Zephyrian flagship's elegant hull cracked like an eggshell. Secondary explosions rippled along her length as her crew attempted to abandon ship. Across the system, the story was the same. Human ships swarmed over their opponents like angry hornets, trading damage at ratios that should have been impossible. When the cruiser Thermopylae lost her engines, she continued fighting as a stationary gun platform until enemy fire finally silenced her guns. The survivors of her crew abandoned ship in escape pods, still firing personal weapons at passing enemy fighters. "Council fleet is breaking apart," Rodriguez reported. "Most of their command ships are dead or dying." Sarah watched the tactical display as the Council formation dissolved into chaos. This was the second lesson they were learning. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to completely destroy their enemies. A new contact appeared on the edge of the system, then another, and another. "Admiral, we have new arrivals," Park announced, his voice suddenly tense. "It's the Council reinforcements, 2 full battle groups, nearly 400 ships." Sarah looked at her own fleet status. She had lost 63 ships, with another 40 damaged but still fighting. Against 400 fresh enemies, they didn't stand a chance in a conventional engagement. Which was why she had never planned on fighting conventionally. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Execute Plan Samson." Every human ship in the system suddenly changed course, accelerating at maximum burn toward the reinforcing Council fleets. At the same time, they began broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. The message was simple, repeated in every known Council language. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Navy. Your occupation of human space ends today. We are transmitting the tactical recordings of this engagement to every world in Council space. Let them see what happens when you threaten humanity." The recording showed the complete destruction of Admiral Zethkala's occupation fleet. It showed human ships fighting with a savagery that no Council species had ever demonstrated. It showed crews who preferred death to surrender, who rammed their ships into enemy vessels when their weapons failed. But most importantly, it showed humans winning. "Ma'am, the Council reinforcements are demanding our surrender," Park reported. "They're threatening to glass every human colony if we don't comply." Sarah's smile was cold as space itself. "Tell them they're welcome to try, but first they should ask Admiral Zethkala how well that worked out." The human fleet continued their charge toward the incoming reinforcements. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing certain destruction. By every measure of military logic, they should have retreated. Instead, they accelerated. As the UES Retribution led her fleet toward the waiting Council armada, Sarah felt a fierce satisfaction burning in her chest. The aliens had wanted to see humanity broken and defeated. Instead, they were about to witness the birth of their worst nightmare. They had awakened something in the darkness between the stars. Something that didn't know how to quit, didn't understand surrender, and would fight until the last ship was nothing but drifting wreckage. They had awakened humanity's wrath. And that wrath was about to consume everything in its path. The Council emergency session convened in the great crystal amphitheater of Nexus Prime, the ancient capital world that had governed the galaxy for millennia. Representatives from 200 species filled the towering chamber, their various forms creating a living mosaic of galactic civilization. The air hummed with translator fields and the nervous energy of beings who had never known true fear. Until now, High Arbiter Velter of the Andromeden Collective raised his forearms for silence. His species had guided the Council for 3,000 years, their crystalline intelligence unmatched in its calculating precision. Today, however, his usually steady voice carried an edge of something no one had heard before. "Uncertainty. The emergency session is called to order," Velter announced, his words rippling across the amphitheater in 100 different languages. "We convene to address the situation developing in the Sol sector." The massive holographic display at the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing tactical recordings from the Proxima Centauri engagement. Council representatives watched in stunned silence as Admiral Zethkala's occupation fleet was systematically destroyed by the primitive human vessels. Senator Crixthak of the Hegemony Worlds leaned forward, his reptilian features twisted in disbelief. "This cannot be accurate. Our intelligence reports indicated that human technology was centuries behind our capabilities." "The recordings are verified," reported General Morden of the Kethter expansion. His people were the Council's premier military strategists, responsible for countless successful pacification campaigns. "We have confirmed the destruction of 78 Council vessels with minimal human losses. This represents the most devastating defeat in our recorded history." A chorus of shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Dulari delegate, her gossamer wings fluttering with agitation, spoke up in her people's melodic language. "Perhaps we underestimated their defensive capabilities. Many species fight harder when protecting their homeworld." "They weren't defending," General Morden interrupted, his voice grim. "Analysis of their tactical patterns shows this was a premeditated assault. They came to Proxima Centauri with the specific intention of destroying our forces and broadcasting the engagement across Council space." High Arbiter Velter gestured to the display, which now showed communication intercepts from across the galaxy. "The human transmission has been received on over 50,000 worlds. Our monitoring stations report widespread distribution through civilian networks, military channels, and even encrypted diplomatic frequencies." The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives began speaking simultaneously. The careful protocols that had governed Council debates for millennia crumbled in the face of unprecedented crisis. "Order," Velter commanded, his voice amplified to override the din. "We must approach this systematically. Ambassador Zethkala, you are the ranking survivor from the Proxima engagement. Report." The wounded Zephyrian commander stepped forward, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's crystal lighting. His left arm hung useless at his side, and his carapace bore the scars of his flagship's destruction. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its former arrogance. "The humans fight like demons," he began, causing several representatives to shift uncomfortably. "They show no regard for acceptable casualty ratios or strategic doctrine. When the destroyer Patton was disabled, her captain deliberately crashed into our heavy cruiser dominance and detonated his reactor core." Senator Crixthak's tongue flicked out nervously. Surely that was an act of desperation. No, Zethkala replied firmly. I reviewed their communications. The captain requested permission for a ramming attack. Their admiral approved it immediately. They plan to use their own ships as weapons from the very beginning. The display shifted to show detailed analysis of human weapon systems. Unlike the elegant energy weapons favored by Council species, human armaments were crude, powerful, and designed for maximum destruction. Their projectile weapons are primitive but effective, General Mordun explained. They fire solid metal slugs at significant fractions of light speed. No finesse, no efficiency, just brute force impact. Their missile systems are even worse. Each projectile carries enough explosive power to crack a moon. How is this possible? Demanded the ethereal representative, her translucent form shimmering with agitation. Our technological surveys indicated they had barely achieved interstellar flight. They had, Velter confirmed. What our surveys failed to account for was their approach to warfare. We assumed they would follow standard galactic conventions. We were wrong. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Council had maintained order through superior technology and unified military doctrine. Every species that joined the Council adopted standardized tactics, weapons, and strategic thinking. Humans had never been given that chance. We must consider our options, Velter continued. The human fleet at Proxima Centauri represents only a fraction of their total military capacity. Intelligence estimates suggest they have at least 2,000 additional vessels scattered throughout their territory. Then we crush them before they can organize, snarled Commander Thexver of the Savage Coast Confederation. His people were the Council's shock troops, bred for aggression and conquest. Mass our fleets and reduce their worlds to ash. With what fleets? General Mordun asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. The Council maintained military superiority through technological advantage, not numerical supremacy. Their forces were spread across thousands of systems, maintaining order through the threat of overwhelming force rather than actual presence. We have the 3rd, 7th, and 9th fleets available for immediate deployment, Mordun continued. That represents approximately 800 vessels. Additional forces would require weeks to assemble. 800 ships should be more than sufficient, Commander Thexver insisted. These humans may fight like savages, but they cannot stand against our combined might. Zethkala's mandibles clicked in what humans would have recognized as bitter laughter. You don't understand. It's not their numbers we should fear. It's their willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. The display changed again, showing intercepted human communications from across their territory. The messages painted a picture that chilled every council representative to their core. Human colonies were preparing for war, not just their military, but their entire civilization. Civilian shipyards were being converted to produce weapons. Merchant vessels were being armed and pressed into military service. Children as young as 12 were volunteering for combat duty. This is madness, whispered the Dulari delegate. No civilized species mobilizes their entire population for war. Humans aren't civilized, Zethkala replied. That's what makes them so dangerous. High Arbiter Velter processed the information with his crystalline intellect, calculating probabilities and outcomes at superhuman speed. What he found disturbed him more than any battle report. We face an impossible situation, he announced to the chamber. If we deploy our available fleets against the humans, we risk losing them as we lost Zethkala's force. If we wait to assemble overwhelming numbers, the humans will have time to strengthen their defenses and potentially launch additional attacks. What do you propose? Asked Senator Crixthak. We offer terms, Velter said simply. The chamber exploded again, this time with outraged protests from the military representatives. Commander Thexver's roar of fury could be heard even over the translator fields. Terms, we don't negotiate with primitives. The Council does not bargain with inferior species. The humans have demonstrated they are not inferior, Velter replied coldly. They have proven their military capabilities exceed our intelligence estimates by several orders of magnitude. More importantly, they have shown they cannot be intimidated or coerced. General Mordun stepped forward, his scarred features grim. High Arbiter, with respect, negotiation is impossible. The human transmission made their position clear. They demand complete council withdrawal from all human space and recognition of their sovereignty. Unacceptable, Senator Crixthack declared. If we grant independence to the humans, every client species in council space will demand the same treatment. Then what alternative do we have? Velter asked. Military conquest appears unlikely to succeed. Economic pressure is meaningless against a species that has already mobilized for total war. Diplomatic isolation has no effect on beings who never sought our approval in the first place. The chamber fell silent as the representatives grappled with an unprecedented situation. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council had faced many challenges. Rebellious client species were crushed through superior firepower. Aggressive neighbors were absorbed through political maneuvering and military pressure. Resource disputes were resolved through economic leverage. No one had ever prepared for an enemy that simply refused to lose. There is another option, General Morden said quietly. We could acknowledge human independence and establish formal diplomatic relations. The suggestion sent shockwaves through the chamber. Several representatives began speaking at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of protest and disbelief. Absolutely not, Commander Thexfer snarled. If we recognize human independence, we legitimize their aggression. Every species in the galaxy will see it as weakness. And if we continue this war, Velter asked, what happens when the humans launch their next attack? Our intelligence suggests they are capable of striking multiple targets simultaneously. The holographic display shifted to show human fleet movements detected across their territory. The pattern was clear to anyone with military experience. The humans weren't just defending anymore, they were positioning for offensive operations. They're planning something massive, General Morden observed. These movements suggest coordinated strikes against our major installations. How many targets? Asked the ethereal representative. Morden's expression grew even grimmer. All of them. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. The Council maintained control through a network of military bases, administrative centers, and strategic installations scattered across the galaxy. If the humans could threaten all of them simultaneously. That's impossible, Senator Crixthack protested. They lack the ships and personnel for such an undertaking. Do they? Velter asked. How many times today have our assumptions about human capabilities proven incorrect? The High Arbiter gestured to the display, which now showed the broader strategic situation. Human space was a relatively small bubble on the galactic map, but it sat at a crucial crossroads between major council sectors. Consider their position, Velter continued. They have secure interior lines of communication. Their manufacturing capacity is growing exponentially. Most importantly, they have demonstrated that our standard tactical doctrines are ineffective against their forces. So what do you recommend? General Morden asked. Velter paused, his crystalline mind processing vast amounts of data. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of millennia. We prepare for the storm that's coming, because ready or not, humanity is about to show us what total war really means. Outside the Crystal Amphitheater, across the galaxy, human fleets were indeed moving. Admiral Sarah Chen's message had been received and understood by every human military commander in space. The gloves were coming off, and the Galactic Council was about to learn why humans were the most dangerous predators ever to reach the stars. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the command center of Titan Station, watching the final preparations for Operation Thunderclap unfold across dozens of tactical displays. The massive space station orbited Saturn, its industrial sections working around the clock to produce the weapons and ships that would soon carry humanity's wrath to every corner of Council space. 3 weeks had passed since Admiral Chen's victory at Proxima Centauri. 3 weeks during which every human colony, station, and outpost had transformed into a fortress. The Council had made their intentions clear when they invaded Sol's space. Now humanity would demonstrate the consequences of that decision. Admiral, we're receiving final confirmation from all fleet commanders, reported Captain Elena Vasquez, Webb's chief of staff. Operation Thunderclap is authorized to commence in 6 hours. Webb nodded grimly. At his age, he had hoped to never see another war. He had commanded ships during the Martian independence crisis, fought pirates in the outer belt, and helped establish humanity's first interstellar colonies. He understood the cost of battle better than most. But the Council had given them no choice. "Signal all units," he ordered. "Execute jump sequence in 5 hours, 57 minutes. Synchronized arrival at all target coordinates." The command center buzzed with controlled energy as communications officers coordinated with fleet commanders across human space. Operation Thunderclap was the most ambitious military undertaking in human history. 15 separate strike forces would simultaneously attack major Council installations throughout the galaxy. The strategy was simple, brutal, and completely unprecedented. Instead of fighting a conventional war of territorial conquest, humanity would strike directly at the Council's ability to govern their vast empire. "Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Chen," announced the communications officer. "The Proxima fleet is ready for jump to the Nexus system." Webb grimaced. The Nexus system was the most heavily defended location in Council space, home to the ancient capital world where the Galactic Council itself convened. Chen's fleet would face odds that made Proxima Centauri look like a training exercise. "Patch me through to all fleet commanders," Webb ordered. The tactical display shifted to show 15 different command bridges scattered across human space. Each admiral commanded between 50 and 300 ships, representing the entire operational capability of the United Earth Space Navy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb began, his voice carrying across light years to reach his subordinates. "In a few hours, we will launch the largest coordinated military operation in galactic history. The Council believes they can intimidate humanity through superior numbers and technology. Today, we prove them wrong." The faces looking back at him showed the same grim determination that had driven Admiral Chen to victory. These were men and women who had watched their homeworld burn, who had seen the Council's mercy in action when they glassed the outer colonies. "Our intelligence indicates the Council is mobilizing their fleets for a massive counterstrike against Sol," Webb continued. "They plan to bring overwhelming force to bear against Earth and end this war through sheer brutality. We will not give them that chance." Admiral Catherine Morrison, commanding the strike force targeted at the Kethter military complex, leaned forward. "Admiral, the intelligence reports suggest we'll be facing prepared defenses at most targets. The Council knows we're coming." "Let them prepare," Webb replied. "They're thinking defensively, trying to protect what they have. We're not here to capture territory or hold ground. We're here to send a message that will echo across the galaxy for 1,000 years." The tactical display zoomed in to show each target system. The Andra shipyards, where Council fleets were constructed. The Zephyrian command complex that coordinated military operations across 3 sectors. The massive logistics hub at Kepler Station that supplied Council forces throughout the galaxy. Each target represented a critical node in the vast network that allowed the Council to govern 200 species across countless worlds. Humanity couldn't conquer the galaxy, but they could bring its government to its knees. "Remember," Webb said, "we're not fighting to win territory. We're fighting to break their will to continue this war. Every ship you destroy, every installation you reduce to scrap, sends a message to every world in Council space." Admiral Jackson Torres, commanding the force assigned to the ethereal research stations, raised his hand. "What about civilian casualties, sir? Some of these targets have significant non-military populations." Webb paused, considering his words carefully. "Our primary targets are military and administrative installations. However, the Council chose to make this a total war when they attempted genocide against humanity. We will not tie our hands with concerns they clearly don't share." The implications hung heavy in the air. Humanity had always tried to fight cleanly, to minimize civilian casualties and follow accepted rules of warfare. But the Council had broken those rules when they opened fire on civilian transports fleeing Earth. "Sir, we're detecting massive Council fleet movements," reported the sensor operator. "It looks like they're massing for their own offensive operation." Webb studied the intelligence reports streaming in from human reconnaissance ships scattered throughout Council space. The enemy was indeed preparing for a decisive strike, gathering nearly 2,000 ships from across their empire. "Perfect," Webb said, surprising his staff. "While they're concentrated for their attack on Sol, their defensive installations will be stripped of protection. Signal all commanders. Thunderclap is now weapons-free. Destroy everything." The countdown clock on the main display showed 4 hours until jump. Across human space, fleet crews made final preparations for the battle that would determine their species' future. Some ships carried veterans of the Proxima Centauri engagement, while others were crewed by civilians who had volunteered when the call went out. All of them understood what was at stake. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the communications system from her position near Proxima Centauri. "Marcus, my fleet is detecting increased Council activity in the Nexus system. It looks like they're evacuating non-essential personnel from the capital." "Acknowledged, Sarah. Stick to the plan. Hit them hard and fast, then get out." "Copy that. See you on the other side." The transmission ended, leaving Webb alone with his thoughts. The Nexus system assault was the most dangerous part of Thunderclap. Even if everything went perfectly, Chen's fleet would face overwhelming odds against the most heavily defended target in the galaxy. But that was exactly why it had to be done. The Council needed to understand that nowhere was safe from humanity's reach. "Admiral, incoming priority message from Earth," Captain Vasquez announced. "It's from President Harrison." The display shifted to show the haggard face of Earth's leader. President Harrison had aged years in the weeks since the Council invasion, but his eyes still burned with the determination that had kept humanity fighting when surrender seemed inevitable. "Admiral Webb, you have full authorization for Thunderclap. The Council has rejected our final diplomatic overture and is proceeding with their offensive against the Sol system. Our defense fleets will hold as long as possible, but the future of humanity now rests with you and your strike forces." Webb straightened in his chair. "Understood, Mr. President. We won't let you down." "I know you won't, Marcus. Give them hell." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. In a few hours, humanity would either establish itself as a galactic power to be respected or face extinction as a species. Webb looked around at his staff, seeing the same mixture of fear and determination on every face. These people had families on Earth, loved ones who would die if Thunderclap failed to break the Council's will to fight. "Final systems check," he ordered. "I want every ship in perfect condition when we jump." The hours passed with agonizing slowness. Reports flowed in from reconnaissance ships, painting a picture of massive Council fleet movements throughout the galaxy. The enemy was clearly preparing for their own decisive offensive, stripping defensive forces from installations across their territory. It was exactly what humanity had hoped for. 30 minutes to jump," announced the tactical officer. Webb activated his personal communicator and sent a message to his wife on Earth. It was short, simple, and might be the last words he ever spoke to her. "I love you, Catherine. Whatever happens, know that we fought for something worth fighting for." He closed the communicator and focused on the tactical displays. 15 human fleets were positioned at jump points throughout known space, ready to strike simultaneously at the heart of Council power. 10 minutes to jump. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council's emergency evacuation of Nexus Prime was proceeding with increasing desperation. The ancient capital world had never been threatened in its 10,000-year history, but intelligence reports left no doubt about human intentions. Admiral Chen's fleet had been detected at the edge of the system, broadcasting the same message that had preceded the Proxima Centauri massacre. 1 minute to jump. Webb closed his eyes and thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. Humanity had reached for the stars seeking knowledge, trade, and peaceful expansion. Instead, they had found an empire that viewed them as nothing more than another client species to be absorbed. The Council had made one fatal mistake. They had assumed humans would react like every other species they had conquered. "Jump in 10 seconds. Webb opened his eyes and watched the countdown reach 0. "Execute, Thunderclap." Throughout human space, 15 fleets vanished into hyperspace, carrying the combined fury of a species that had been pushed too far. Each ship represented years of human ingenuity, determination, and the simple refusal to accept defeat. The Galactic Council was about to learn why Earth's predators had conquered their own world long before they reached the stars, and why cornering humanity had been the greatest mistake in galactic history. Operation Thunderclap was underway, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the ancient capital world of Nexus Prime grow larger on her tactical display, as the UES Retribution, and her fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system. The planet hung like a blue-green jewel against the void, surrounded by the most formidable defensive network in galactic history. "Tactical assessment," she ordered, her voice cutting through the bridge's tense silence. "Ma'am, we're looking at over 300 defensive platforms," Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez reported, his fingers dancing across the sensor controls. "Orbital fortresses, weapon satellites, and at least 60 capital ships on picket duty. The Nexus defense grid shows no gaps in coverage." Chen nodded grimly. Intelligence had warned them about the defenses, but seeing them firsthand was still sobering. Any rational military commander would have taken one look at those numbers and turned around. Fortunately for humanity, Chen had stopped being rational the day the Council glassed Neptune Station. "Signal the fleet," she commanded. "Execute Plan Omega." The human fleet spread out across the system's edge, each ship taking a predetermined position. To outside observers, it looked like a textbook deployment for a siege operation. Chen was counting on that assumption to give her the element of surprise. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from Nexus Defense Command," the communications officer announced. "It's Fleet Admiral Kethmer of the Council Combined Fleet." Chen straightened in her command chair. Kethmer was a legend in Council military circles, the architect of a dozen successful pacification campaigns. If the Council had assigned him to defend their capital, they were taking the human threat seriously. "Put him through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of a Kethter military commander. His reptilian features were scarred from countless battles, and his eyes held the cold intelligence of a born predator. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of 10,000 years of galactic dominance. "Human fleet, you are ordered to withdraw immediately from Nexus space. This system is under the protection of the Galactic Council Combined Fleet. Any aggressive action will result in your complete destruction." Chen stood and faced the screen, her hands clasped behind her back. "Admiral Kethmer, I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Navy. Your government made a mistake when they invaded human space. Today, we're here to collect payment for that mistake." Kethmer's tongue flicked out, tasting the air in what Chen recognized as a threat display. "Admiral Chen, your reputation precedes you. However, the Proxima Centauri engagement was against an unprepared occupation fleet. You now face the finest defensive network in the galaxy, commanded by the most experienced military officers in Council history." "I'm counting on it," Chen replied with a cold smile. "When we destroy your defenses, we want to make sure the galaxy knows we beat your best." The Kethter Admiral's eyes narrowed. "Your confidence is admirable but misplaced. You command perhaps 200 ships against our defensive force of over 400 vessels. Mathematics alone dictates your defeat." Chen's smile widened. "Admiral, you're thinking like a council species. Humans don't do math the same way you do." She gestured to her communications officer, who opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, commence Operation Prometheus." What happened next shattered every assumption about human fleet tactics that Council intelligence had developed. Instead of advancing in formation toward the defensive perimeter, the human ships began deploying what appeared to be massive cargo containers from their holds. Hundreds of metal boxes drifted through space, seemingly abandoned by the fleet that had carried them. To the watching Council defenders, it looked like the humans were jettisoning supplies in preparation for a desperate attack. "They were wrong. Admiral, the human fleet is pulling back," reported Kethmer's tactical officer. "They appear to be retreating to the system's edge." Kethmer studied the tactical display with confusion. The containers continued to drift toward the inner system, carried by the momentum imparted during deployment. It made no tactical sense. "Scan those containers," he ordered. "I want to know what the humans are up to." The sensor returns showed exactly what they appeared to be: simple metal containers with basic maneuvering thrusters and minimal power signatures. Whatever the humans were planning, it wasn't immediately obvious. That should have been Kethmer's first warning. Chen watched her own tactical display with satisfaction as the containers reached their predetermined positions throughout the Nexus system. Each box contained 100 automated drones, equipped with basic weapons, and just enough intelligence to identify and attack Council targets. But that wasn't the real threat. "Admiral, all packages are in position," reported her tactical officer. "Standing by for activation." Chen took a deep breath. What she was about to do would fundamentally change the nature of warfare throughout the galaxy. The Council's carefully maintained technological superiority was about to become meaningless. "Activate Prometheus Protocol," she ordered. Throughout the system, 1,000 cargo containers suddenly came alive. Their sides unfolded like mechanical flowers, revealing not drones or weapons, but something far more dangerous. Manufacturing systems. Each container held a compact automated factory, designed by human engineers to operate in the vacuum of space. Fed by raw materials harvested from asteroids and debris, they could produce simple but effective weapons, sensors, and spacecraft at an exponential rate. "What in the void are those things?" Kethmer demanded as his sensors detected the sudden spike in industrial activity throughout his system. His tactical officer's voice was tight with disbelief. "Admiral, they appear to be manufacturing facilities. They're producing something, lots of somethings." The first wave of products rolled off the automated production lines 30 minutes later. Simple fighter craft, barely more than engines with guns attached, but produced in staggering numbers. Where the human fleet had deployed 1,000 containers, those containers were now spawning 10,000 attack craft. Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as her automated factories shifted into full production. The fighter craft were crude compared to Council technology, but they had one overwhelming advantage. They could be produced faster than the enemy could destroy them. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Begin Phase 2. The human ships that had withdrawn to the system's edge suddenly reversed course, charging directly toward the Council defensive perimeter. But now they weren't alone. Streams of automated fighters poured from the manufacturing centers, creating a metallic tide that swept toward Nexus Prime. Admiral Kethmer watched in growing horror as his defensive calculations became meaningless. He had planned to face 200 human ships. Instead, he was watching an enemy force that was growing by the minute. "Open fire on those manufacturing centers," he commanded. "Destroy them before they can produce more of those fighters." The Council Defense Fleet began targeting the automated factories, scoring hits and destroying dozens of them. But the containers were scattered throughout the system, and those that survived continued producing attack craft at an incredible rate. More importantly, the human fleet was now in range. The UES Retribution led the charge, her guns blazing as she closed with the nearest orbital fortress. Behind her, 199 other human warships unleashed everything they had at the Council defenses. The battle for Nexus Prime exploded across the system as human ships and their automated escorts engaged the most powerful defensive network in galactic history. It was chaos on a scale that no one had ever imagined. Human fighters swarmed over Council capital ships like angry insects, their simple weapons chipping away at shields and armor through sheer volume of fire. When defensive guns destroyed one wave, 2 more were already rolling off the production lines. "Admiral, we're losing containment," Kethmer's tactical officer reported. "The human manufacturing systems are producing faster than we can destroy them. Current projections show enemy numerical superiority within 2 hours." Kethmer stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In 40 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. The humans had turned logistics into a weapon, using the galaxy's own resources against its defenders. "Signal the Council," he ordered. "Request immediate reinforcement from all available fleets." "Sir, the nearest reinforcements are 6 hours away." Kethmer closed his eyes. In 6 hours, there wouldn't be a Council defense fleet left to reinforce. Chen felt the Retribution shudder under enemy fire as she closed with one of the massive orbital fortresses guarding Nexus Prime. The station's weapons were powerful enough to crack a moon, but her ship's crude armor continued to absorb punishment while returning fire. "Direct hit on their primary reactor," Rodriguez reported. "The fortress is losing power." "Target the next one," Chen ordered. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the calm efficiency of veterans who had faced impossible odds and lived to tell about it. The tactical display showed the battle's progress across the entire system. Human ships and automated fighters were engaging Council forces at dozens of locations simultaneously, turning the carefully planned defense into a series of desperate skirmishes. "Ma'am, we're receiving reports from the other strike forces," the communications officer announced. "Admiral Torres has successfully engaged the ethereal research stations. Admiral Morrison reports heavy fighting at the Kethter military complex, but progress is ahead of schedule." Chen nodded. Operation Thunderclap was proceeding exactly as planned. Across the galaxy, human strike forces were hitting Council installations with the same automated manufacturing tactics she was using at Nexus Prime. The Council was learning a hard lesson about fighting an enemy that treated war as an industrial process. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Nexus Prime," the communications officer announced. "It's from the High Arbiter himself." Chen raised an eyebrow. For the leader of the Galactic Council to personally contact an enemy commander suggested a level of desperation she hadn't expected to see so quickly. "Put him through." The screen showed the crystalline features of High Arbiter Velter, his 4 arms moving in agitation. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its usual calm authority. "Admiral Chen, I am authorized to offer terms for the immediate cessation of hostilities. The Council is prepared to discuss the withdrawal of our forces from human space." Chen studied the alien leader for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew continued their work, coordinating the battle that was systematically dismantling the greatest military power in galactic history. "High Arbiter," she said finally, "3 weeks ago your representative offered us terms. We were told to surrender unconditionally or face extinction. Today, I'm offering you the same choice." Velter's crystalline features reflected the bridge lighting as he processed her words. "Admiral, surely we can reach some form of accommodation. The Council has no desire to see this conflict escalate further." "Really?" Chen asked. "Because your fleets are currently massing for an attack on Earth. Our intelligence suggests you plan to reduce my homeworld to radioactive ash." The High Arbiter's hesitation was all the confirmation Chen needed. "I thought so," she continued. "Here's my counteroffer. Withdraw all Council forces from human space immediately. Recognize human independence and territorial sovereignty. Pay reparations for the colonies you destroyed. Do all of this, and we might consider letting you keep your government." Velter's arms moved faster, his agitation increasing. "Admiral, you cannot seriously expect the Council to capitulate to such demands. We govern 200 species across the galaxy." "Not anymore," Chen replied coldly. "Today you learned that humans don't just fight wars, we industrialize them. By the time this battle is over, every species in the galaxy will have seen footage of your capital world under attack by ships manufactured from asteroids." She gestured to the tactical display, which showed the ongoing battle in all its chaotic glory. Human factories continued producing attack craft, while the original fleet carved through Council defenses with relentless efficiency. "The question isn't whether you can defeat humanity," Chen continued. "The question is whether you can survive us." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts as the battle raged around her. Through the viewports, she could see the lights of Nexus Prime, the ancient capital that had ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia. In a few hours, those lights would be dark, and the galaxy would have a new apex predator. 6 months after Operation Thunderclap, the galaxy looked very different than it had under 10 millennia of Council rule. High Arbiter Velter stood in what had once been the grand chamber of galactic governance, now reduced to a simple conference room in a hastily constructed diplomatic facility on the neutral world of Haven. Across the table sat Admiral Sarah Chen, representing the newly formed Terran Federation. Behind her, holographic displays showed the current state of what had once been Council space. The images told a story of complete systemic collapse. "The Kethter expansion has formally seceded from the Council," Chen reported, reading from her diplomatic briefing. "They've established the Kethter Empire and are currently annexing former Council territory in the Orion Arm. The Zephyrian hives have fractured into 17 separate kingdoms, all claiming to be the legitimate government. The Ethereals have retreated to their homeworld and refuse all contact with outside species." Velter's crystalline features reflected the conference room lighting as he processed the information. The Galactic Council, which had maintained order across the galaxy for 10,000 years, had effectively ceased to exist as a governing body. "What of the client species?" he asked quietly. Chen's expression softened slightly. Many have declared independence. Others are forming regional alliances for mutual protection. A few have requested human assistance in establishing stable governments. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Humanity, the species the Council had tried to absorb as another client state, was now being asked to help govern the galaxy. "Admiral, you must understand the implications of what you've done," Velter said, his voice carrying a note of desperation. "The Council maintained peace for millennia. Without central authority, the galaxy will descend into chaos." Chen leaned back in her chair, studying the alien leader who had once commanded the respect and fear of 200 species. "High Arbiter, with respect, your peace was maintained through the threat of overwhelming violence against anyone who disagreed with your policies." She gestured to one of the holographic displays, which showed casualty reports from the Council's various pacification campaigns over the centuries. The numbers were staggering. "You crushed 43 species into extinction rather than allow them to maintain their independence. You enslaved entire sectors under the guise of guidance and protection. Your peace was built on the bones of anyone who dared to resist." Velter's four arms moved in agitation. Those actions were necessary to maintain stability. Without the Council's authority, you will see conflicts that make our pacification campaigns look trivial. "Maybe," Chen acknowledged. "But at least those conflicts will be fought by free peoples making their own choices, rather than subjects bowing to the will of their overlords." The door to the conference room opened, and Admiral Marcus Webb entered, followed by representatives from a dozen other species. The delegation included former council members, newly independent worlds, and regional alliance leaders. "Admiral Chen, High Arbiter Velter," Webb nodded to each of them. "The assembly is ready for your final proposals." Chen stood, gathering her diplomatic materials. After 6 months of negotiations, they had finally reached the moment of decision. The remaining council loyalists would either accept the new galactic order or face the consequences of continued resistance. "Shall we proceed?" she asked Velter. The former High Arbiter rose slowly, his movements reflecting the weight of his fallen civilization. "Admiral, before we join the others, I must ask, what did you hope to accomplish with this war? Was the destruction of our civilization truly worth whatever principles you fought to defend?" Chen paused at the door, considering his question. It was something that had kept her awake during the long months of reconstruction and negotiation. "High Arbiter, my species has a saying. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. We didn't choose this war. You brought it to us when you decided humanity was too dangerous to exist independently." She turned to face him directly. "But once you forced us to fight, we fought to win. Not just the battles, but the underlying conflict between freedom and subjugation." The assembly hall was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. Where the old council chamber had been arranged to emphasize the hierarchical relationship between the ruling species and their subjects, this new gathering was deliberately egalitarian. Every delegate sat at the same level, with no elevated platforms or ceremonial distinctions. Chen took her place at the speaker's podium, looking out at the diverse collection of beings who would determine the galaxy's future. Some faces showed hope, others fear, and many reflected the uncertainty that came with unprecedented change. "Delegates of the Galactic Assembly," she began. 6 months ago, the galaxy was ruled by a council that claimed authority over every inhabited world, every trade route, and every aspect of interstellar civilization. Today, that authority no longer exists. A murmur ran through the assembly. Everyone present understood the implications, but hearing it stated so bluntly still carried emotional weight. "The question before us now is simple," Chen continued. "What kind of galaxy do we want to build from the ashes of the old order?" She activated a holographic display that showed current galactic conditions. The map was a patchwork of independent worlds, regional alliances, ongoing conflicts, and ungoverned space. The Terran Federation proposes a new model for galactic civilization. Instead of centralized authority imposed by superior force, we suggest a voluntary confederation based on mutual benefit and shared principles. The Kethter delegate, General Vorthak, stood to speak. His species had quickly adapted to independence, but their military nature made them skeptical of voluntary cooperation. "Admiral Chen, How can such a system maintain order without enforcement authority? What prevents stronger species from simply conquering weaker neighbors? Chen smiled. It was exactly the question she had expected. General, the same thing that prevented the Council from conquering humanity. The knowledge that aggression will be met with overwhelming response from those who value freedom. She gestured to another display showing human fleet dispositions throughout the galaxy. In the months following Thunderclap, humanity had established monitoring stations and rapid response forces in dozens of strategic locations. The Terran Federation doesn't seek to rule the galaxy, Chen explained. But we will defend any species that chooses freedom over subjugation. Our automated manufacturing systems can produce defensive fleets faster than any aggressor can build invasion forces. The ethereal delegate, speaking through a translation matrix, posed the next question. What of species that prefer the old system? Some worlds functioned well under Council authority. They're free to maintain that structure, Chen replied. The difference is choice. Under the old system, worlds were forced to submit to Council authority. Under the new Confederation, they can choose their own government and align with whoever they wish. High Arbiter Velter stood slowly. As the last official representative of the old council, his words carried special weight. Admiral Chen, you speak of choice and freedom, but your own actions belie those principles. You destroyed our civilization through overwhelming force. How is that different from the methods you condemn? Chen met his gaze steadily. High Arbiter, the difference is simple. We used force to restore choice to the galaxy's peoples. You used force to deny it. She activated another display, showing footage from Operation Thunderclap. The images of human fleets striking Council installations across the galaxy still had the power to silence any room. Every target we struck was military or governmental. Every species we freed was given the choice of their own path. We didn't conquer territory or impose our will on others. We simply removed the boot from their necks. The debate continued for hours, with delegates raising concerns about everything from trade regulation to mutual defense. Through it all, Chen patiently explained the Terran Federation's position. Voluntary cooperation between free peoples, backed by the guarantee that aggression would be met with swift and overwhelming response. Finally, the moment of decision arrived. Each delegation would vote on whether to join the new Galactic Confederation or maintain their independent status. One by one, the votes were cast. The Dulari chose Confederation. The Savage Coast worlds voted for independence but mutual cooperation. The former Zephyrian kingdoms split their votes, with some joining and others remaining neutral. When the counting was finished, 47 species had voted to join the Confederation, 32 chose independence with cooperation agreements, and only 8 delegations voted to attempt restoration of the old council system. High Arbiter Velter stood as the final vote was announced. His crystalline features reflected the chamber lighting as he faced the end of 10,000 years of galactic order. Admiral Chen, he said formally, the Andromedan Collective accepts the dissolution of the Galactic Council and recognizes the legitimacy of the new Confederation. Chen nodded respectfully. High Arbiter, your people are welcome to join the Confederation as equals or maintain independence with full diplomatic recognition. The choice is yours. As the assembly dissolved into smaller groups discussing implementation details, Chen stepped out onto a balcony overlooking Haven's capital city. The planet had been chosen as neutral ground precisely because it had never been aligned with any major power. Admiral Webb joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the old Earth-style cafe that had been established for the human delegation. Feeling the weight of history, he asked, handing her a cup. Chen sipped the coffee, tasting the familiar bitter warmth that reminded her of home. I keep thinking about what we've unleashed. The Council maintained stability for 10 millennia. Now we've shattered that system and replaced it with, what? Hope and good intentions. Webb leaned against the balcony railing, looking out at the bustling city below. Sarah, you're thinking like a human from the old Earth, worried about maintaining order and preventing chaos. But look around us. He gestured toward the streets, where beings from dozens of species worked together, traded freely, and moved without the constant oversight that had characterized Council space. This isn't chaos, Webb continued. This is freedom, messy, complicated, sometimes inefficient freedom, but it's real and it's chosen. Chen considered his words as she watched a group of young Dulari children playing with human kids in a small park below. Their game involved no translators, no cultural protocols, just the universal language of play. "Maybe you're right," she said finally. "The galaxy might be more chaotic without the Council, but it'll also be more alive." Her communicator chirped with an incoming message from Earth. The display showed President Harrison's face, but behind him she could see the rebuilt skyline of New Geneva. "Admiral Chen, I wanted to congratulate you on today's vote. The Assembly's decision validates everything we fought for." Chen smiled. "Thank you, Mr. President. How are the reconstruction efforts proceeding?" "Better than expected. We've had requests for assistance from over 100 worlds. It seems our manufacturing technology is as valuable for building as it was for fighting." That was perhaps the greatest irony of the entire war. The automated factories that had helped humanity defeat the Council were now being used to rebuild the galaxy they had helped liberate. "There's something else," Harrison continued. "We've received a formal request from the Kethter Empire. They want to establish a military alliance with the Federation." Chen raised an eyebrow. General Vorthak moves quickly. "It seems your demonstration at Thunderclap impressed more than just the Council," Harrison replied. "Half the galaxy wants to either join us or ally with us. The other half is too busy rebuilding to cause trouble." As the transmission ended, Chen reflected on the path that had led them to this moment. Humanity had reached for the stars seeking knowledge and expansion. Instead, they had found an empire that viewed them as a threat to be eliminated. The Council had been right to fear them, but for the wrong reasons. Humanity wasn't dangerous because they were aggressive or expansionist. They were dangerous because they refused to accept that freedom was negotiable. "Admiral," Webb said quietly, "what's our next move? The Confederation is established, but we both know this is just the beginning." Chen finished her coffee and turned back toward the assembly hall, where delegates were still working out the details of their new civilization. "We do what humans have always done, Marcus. We build something better." Behind them, the galaxy stretched out in all its chaotic, messy, magnificent freedom. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of choice had begun. And throughout the stars, species that had forgotten what independence meant were remembering how to dream of their own futures. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity had fought to achieve. Freedom wasn't neat or orderly or efficient, but it was worth every sacrifice they had made to secure it. The Tree of Liberty had indeed been refreshed, and from its roots, 1,000 new civilizations would grow.